The crown appeared exactly 3 seconds after someone called her a charity case playing dress-up. Elena Westbrook stood frozen in the center of the Grandview Country Club. Ballroom, 7 months pregnant, wearing a gown she'd sewn herself, while 200 of the city's elite stared at her with expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed contempt. She felt the baby kick hard, as if even her unborn daughter sensed the humiliation washing over them both. But that was before the crown, before everything changed, before they all learned who she really was. 6 months earlier, Elena had been living what she thought was a simple, beautiful life. She worked as a seamstress in a small alteration shop on Maple Street, the kind of place where elderly women brought their late husbands, suits to be repurposed where brides came for last minute, hem adjustments where the smell of fabric and the hum of sewing machines created a peculiar kind of peace. Elena loved her work. She loved the way thread could mend what was broken, the way a simple adjustment could make someone stand a little taller. Her apartment was tiny, a studio above a bakery where the smell of fresh bread woke her each morning. She didn't mind the size. She'd grown up with less. Much less. The orphanage in Eastern Europe where she spent her childhood had taught her to be grateful for small spaces that were warm, for food that was consistent, for safety that was reliable. America had given her all three, plus something she'd never dared dream of, the possibility of family. Then she met Daniel. Daniel Harrington walked into her shop on a Tuesday afternoon with a torn jacket and a smile that made her forget how to thread a needle. He was handsome in an effortless way, dark hair that curled slightly at the edges, gray eyes that seemed to actually see her, not just look at her. He worked in finance, he said. Something about investment portfolios and risk assessment that sounded important but abstract. Can you fix this? He'd asked, holding up a jacket with a ripped lining. It was my father's. I know it's old-fashioned. But it's beautiful, Elena had interrupted, taking the jacket with reverent hands. The fabric was exquisite, a wool blend that they didn't make anymore. Hand-stitched buttonholes, a label from a London tailor that had closed decades ago. Your father had excellent taste. Daniel's smile had softened. He passed away 2 years ago. I'm sorry. She'd meant it. She understood loss in a way that most people didn't. He'd come back 3 days later to pick up the jacket. Then he'd come back the following week with another repair. Then he'd come back just to talk. Within a month, they were having coffee. Within 2 months, dinner. Within 3 months, Elena was in love in a way that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Daniel was kind, patient. He listened when she talked about her dreams of opening her own boutique someday, of creating custom pieces for women who wanted something unique. He held her hand during old movies. He learned to say "I love you" in her native language, stumbling over the pronunciation in a way that made her laugh and cry simultaneously. When he proposed 6 months into their relationship, kneeling in her tiny apartment with a simple gold band, Elena had said yes before he'd even finished the question. They were married a month later in a small ceremony at the courthouse, with Elena's boss and Daniel's assistant as witnesses. No big wedding. Daniel said his family was complicated and he'd rather start fresh, just the two of them. Elena understood. She had no family to invite anyway. The pregnancy came as a surprise 3 months after the wedding. Elena had been terrified at first. She'd never had a mother, didn't know how to be one, but Daniel had been overjoyed. He'd held her and promised that their daughter would never feel unwanted, never feel alone, never spend a single day wondering if she was loved. Elena believed him. She'd spent the past 7 months preparing. She'd sewn tiny dresses with careful stitches, read every parenting book the library had, talked to her growing belly about all the things they'd do together. She'd felt her daughter's first kick while hemming a wedding dress, had wept with joy in the middle of the shop while her boss looked on with knowing grandmother eyes. Life wasn't perfect. Money was tight. Daniel's job was demanding but didn't pay as much as she'd expected, and they were saving every penny for the baby. They'd moved to a slightly larger apartment, but it was still modest. Elena didn't mind. She'd build their family the same way she built her clothes, stitch by careful stitch, with patience and love. Then came the invitation. Daniel had come home 3 weeks ago with an embossed envelope, his face pale. We've been invited to the Grandview Country Club Spring Gala, he'd said quietly, handing her the heavy cardstock. Elena had stared at the invitation with confusion. The country club? But we're not members. No. Daniel had sat down heavily on their worn couch. But my family was. I didn't think. I haven't been to one of these events since. He'd stopped, rubbing his face. My mother organized this gala. She must have added us to the guest list. This was the first time Daniel had mentioned his mother in months. Elena knew the basics. Daniel's family was wealthy old money, connected to half the city's elite. His father had died, and Daniel had some kind of falling out with his mother afterward. He never wanted to talk about it, and Elena had never pushed. Do we have to go? She'd asked softly. Daniel had looked at her then, something complicated in his expression. I think it might be time. Time for them to meet you. To know about the baby. I've been avoiding this, but he'd reached for her hand. You're my family now. Our daughter is my family, and maybe it's time to bridge that gap. Elena had felt a flutter of anxiety beneath her ribs, separate from the baby's movements. What if they don't like me? They'll love you, Daniel had said, but his voice hadn't quite carried conviction. And if they don't, it doesn't matter. We don't need their approval. But Elena could see that some part of him did need it. Some part of him wanted his mother to accept the life he'd chosen. The woman he'd married, the child they were bringing into the world. So she'd said yes. She'd spent the next 3 weeks creating a gown. She couldn't afford to buy something suitable for a country club gala, but she could make something. She was good with her hands, good at turning limited resources into something beautiful. She found fabric on clearance, a deep midnight blue that reminded her of the sky just before full darkness. She'd stayed up late every night after work, stitching by lamplight, creating a design that would accommodate her pregnant belly while still looking elegant. Empire waist, flowing skirt, delicate beading at the neckline that she'd added one tiny crystal at a time. When she'd finished it the night before the gala, she'd stood in front of their bathroom mirror and felt a surge of pride. The dress was beautiful. She looked beautiful. Pregnancy had given her skin a glow, had softened her features. She'd pulled her dark hair into an updo, had borrowed a necklace from her boss, nothing expensive, just a simple silver pendant, and had told herself that she could do this. She could walk into a room full of wealthy strangers and hold her head high. She was Daniel's wife, the mother of his child. That was enough. It had to be enough. The night of the gala, Daniel had been quiet during the drive. His hands had gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his jaw set in a way that made Elena nervous. Are you okay? She'd asked. Just preparing myself, he'd said. My mother can be difficult, and her friends are. He'd paused. Just stay close to me, okay? We'll make an appearance, let them meet you, and then we can leave. But that's not what happened. They'd arrived at the Grandview Country Club just as the sun was setting, painting the sprawling estate in shades of gold and amber. The building itself was all white columns and marble stairs, the kind of place Elena had only seen in movies. Luxury cars lined the circular driveway. Women in glittering gowns and men in perfectly tailored tuxedos streamed through the entrance. Elena had felt her homemade dress suddenly feel less elegant, more homemade. Daniel had squeezed her hand as they walked up the stairs. You look beautiful, he'd whispered. She'd wanted to believe him. The ballroom was breathtaking crystal chandeliers, gilded mirrors, tables draped in white silk with centerpieces of white roses and orchids. A string quartet played in one corner. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Elena's weekly grocery budget. Everyone turned to look when they entered. It wasn't the warm, welcoming kind of attention. It was the assessing kind. The weighing kind. Elena felt 200 pairs of eyes cataloging her dress, her belly, her face, her shoes, her necklace, finding her lacking in every category. Daniel, the voice cut through the murmur of conversation. A woman approached them, tall, slender, wearing a cream-colored gown that probably cost more than 3 months of Elena's rent. Her hair was perfectly silver, cut in a sharp bob. Her jewelry was understated but clearly expensive. Her face was beautiful and cold. Daniel's mother. Hello, Mother, Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral. Victoria Harrington's gaze swept over Elena like a winter wind. So this is her, not this is your wife, not I'm so glad to finally meet you. Just this is her. Like Elena was an object, a problem, a mistake. This is Elena, Daniel said firmly. My wife, and the mother of your granddaughter. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She gestured to Elena's belly with one manicured hand. How quaint. You didn't think to wait until after the wedding? Or were you worried he'd change his mind? Elena felt the words like a slap. We married first, she said quietly. The baby came after. How convenient, Victoria said. And that dress, did you make it yourself? How resourceful. It wasn't a compliment. She's a seamstress, Daniel said, and Elena heard the defensiveness in his voice. A talented one. I'm sure, Victoria interrupted. She turned to address the crowd that had gathered around them. Everyone, this is my son Daniel, and his wife, Elena. From where was it again, dear? Eastern Europe, Elena said. I grew up in an orphanage, yes, Daniel mentioned. Victoria's smile was sharp. How tragic. And now you've found yourself a husband and a baby and a new life. Quite the American dream. The people around them laughed, not warm laughter. Knowing laughter, cruel laughter. Elena felt her face burn. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she'd never trapped anyone, that she and Daniel loved each other, that their daughter was wanted and celebrated. But the words stuck in her throat. Mother, Daniel said, his voice tight. That's enough, is it? Victoria tilted her head. You disappeared for a year, Daniel, no calls, no visits. You cut yourself off from your family, from your inheritance, from your rightful place in society. And now you show up with a wife none of us have met and a baby on the way. What exactly did you expect? That we'd throw you a parade? I expected basic decency, Daniel said. Decency. Victoria's laugh was hollow. You want to talk about decency? You married some foreign girl who makes clothes for a living, got her pregnant. And now you're here because what? You need money? You want back into the family trust? That's not why we're here, Daniel said, but Elena heard something crack in his voice. Victoria heard it too. Her eyes narrowed. Then why are you here, Daniel? The ballroom had gone silent. Everyone was watching now. Watching Elena's humiliation play out like dinner theater. We came because I wanted my family to meet my wife, Daniel said. I wanted to try to repair what? Victoria's voice rose. You made your choice, Daniel. You chose her over us, over your legacy, over everything your father built. And now you're here, wearing that same old jacket I've seen you in a dozen times. While she's in some homemade dress, and you expect us to what? Welcome you back with open arms? Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She'd sewn that dress with such care. Had thought it was beautiful. Now all she could see were the imperfections, the slightly uneven hem, the beading that wasn't quite symmetrical, the fabric that was pretty but not expensive. Let's go, Daniel said quietly, taking Elena's arm. But before they could move, another voice cut through the silence. Oh my God, is that really her? A woman in a red dress stepped forward, young, blonde, beautiful, in that effortless way that spoke of genetics and money and personal trainers. The girl from the orphanage? The one who trapped Daniel? Victoria, you told us about her, but I thought you were exaggerating. I don't exaggerate, Bethany, Victoria said coolly. Bethany circled Elena like a shark. That dress is adorable. Did you use a pattern or just wing it? I love how you can't even tell it's homemade unless you look closely. Well, I mean, you can tell, but it's very earnest. More laughter. Sharper now. Bethany, Daniel warned, but Bethany wasn't finished. She addressed the crowd. Everyone, let's be honest. We all know what this is. Some girl from nowhere lands a Harrington. Gets pregnant immediately. Shows up in a dress she made in her apartment. I mean, it's textbook, isn't it? The oldest trick in the book. Elena's hands moved instinctively to her belly, protective. The baby kicked, as if sensing her mother's distress. That's enough, Daniel said, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. Is it though? Another voice. Male this time. A man in a tuxedo with a red face and expensive watch. Come on, Danny boy. We all know your mother tried to set you up with appropriate girls. Bethany was supposed to be your wife. You two dated for years, and then you just vanished and came back with... This, Elena said quietly, finding her voice, has a name, and a heart, and feelings. And she, standing right here listening to all of you talk about her like she's not human. The ballroom went silent. Oh, she speaks, Bethany said, feigning surprise. I wasn't sure if the language barrier. There's no language barrier, Elena said, her accent thickening with emotion. I speak English perfectly. I work hard. I pay my bills. I married a man I love, and we're having a baby we want. I don't know what I did to deserve this treatment, except maybe be born in the wrong country or not have enough money for your standards. Victoria stepped closer. You did nothing wrong, dear, except misunderstand your place. You're not one of us. You'll never be one of us. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone. Not one of you? Elena repeated. What does that even mean? It means, Victoria said slowly, as if speaking to a child, that you don't belong here. In this ballroom, at this club, in this family. You're a charity case playing dress-up, and we all know it. That's when it happened. That's when Elena felt something shift in the air. The ballroom lights flickered once, twice, and then someone screamed. The scream came from near the entrance. Everyone turned. An older man stood in the doorway, flanked by two younger men in dark suits. But it wasn't the men that caught everyone's attention. It was the way he was staring at Elena. His face had gone completely white. His hand clutched at his chest. His eyes were wide with shock, with recognition, with something that looked like fear and awe combined. It's not possible, he whispered, but his voice carried in the silent ballroom. It's not possible, Victoria frowned. Ambassador Petrov, are you quite all right? Ambassador Petrov took a step forward, his legs shaking. He was an old man 70 at least, with white hair and a face carved by years of diplomacy and difficult decisions. Elena had never seen him before in her life, but he was looking at her like he'd seen a ghost. His voice broke. He tried again. Where did you get that necklace? Elena's hand flew to the simple silver pendant at her throat, the one her boss had lent her. I borrowed it. From a friend. Why? Petrov moved closer, his guards following protectively. The crowd parted for him. When he reached Elena, he stared at the necklace with tears forming in his eyes. May I? He asked, his hand trembling as he reached toward it. Elena nodded, confused. He lifted the pendant gently, examining it closely. Then he turned it over, and Elena saw something she'd never noticed before, an engraving on the back. Small, almost imperceptible. Petrov read it aloud, his voice shaking. Katerina Alexeyevna. 1995. The room seemed to tilt. How do you have this? Petrov demanded, but gently, looking at Elena with desperate hope. How do you have the Duchess's necklace? The ... what? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Victoria Harrington stepped forward, impatient. Ambassador, what is the meaning of this interruption? We're in the middle of... Be silent, Petrov said, and his voice carried such authority that Victoria actually stopped speaking. Girl, what is your name? Elena. Elena Westbrook. Well, Elena Harrington now. Your full name. Your birth name. I don't know my birth name. I was found as a baby. At an orphanage. In Moldavia, Petrov finished. At the St. Catherine's Orphanage. On March 5th, 10th, 1995, during the revolution. Elena's blood ran cold. How do you know that? Petrov's eyes filled with tears. Because I was there. I was the one who brought you there. I was the one who saved you from the palace when it burned. The ballroom erupted in whispers. What palace? Elena asked, but she was shaking now, the baby kicking frantically inside her. Petrov turned to address the crowd, his voice ringing with authority. This woman you just humiliated is not some orphan from nowhere. She is the Grand Duchess Elena Katerina Alexeyevna Romanova, the last surviving member of the Romanov line, the rightful heir to a throne that no longer exists. Someone laughed. That's absurd. The Romanovs ended in 1918, yes, Petrov said. In Russia. But the line continued in secret. Hidden. Protected. Elena's grandmother was a Romanov who married into Eastern European nobility. Her mother was the Duchess of Moldavia. And when the revolution came, when the palace burned, when everyone thought the entire family had died, I saved one person. A 3-month-old baby. I brought her to the orphanage and gave the necklace to the Mother Superior, with instructions to give it to the child when she came of age. He turned back to Elena. The Mother Superior must have passed away before she could tell you. But that necklace, it was your mother's. It was meant to help you find your way home someday. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You're saying I'm a duchess? You're more than a duchess, Petrov said softly. You're the last of a royal line. And if Moldavia still had a monarchy, you would be its queen. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Victoria Harrington looked like she might faint. Daniel stood frozen, staring at his wife with an expression Elena couldn't read. And Elena felt the world spinning, felt everything she thought she knew about herself fracturing and reforming into something new and terrifying and impossible. But she started. You're just what? Petrov asked, A seamstress, a nobody? A charity case? He looked at Victoria with cold fury. Is that what you called her? Do you have any idea what you've done? Whom you've insulted? This is ridiculous, Victoria said, but her voice wavered. She can't possibly be— There's no proof. There's proof, one of Petrov's guards said quietly, pulling out a tablet. If I may, Ambassador? Petrov nodded. The guard held up the tablet, showing a photograph, old, faded, but clear. A woman in an elaborate dress, wearing a crown, holding a baby. The woman's face was older than Elena's, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes. The same high cheekbones. The same delicate nose. The Duchess Katerina, the guard said, holding her daughter Elena, 3 months old. Taken 2 weeks before the palace burned. He swiped to another photo. The necklace. There it was, around the Duchess's neck. The same pendant. He swiped again. The crown jewels of Moldavia. A tiara, delicate, beautiful, covered in diamonds and sapphires. Lost during the revolution. Presumed destroyed. Elena stared at the photos, at the woman who was supposedly her mother, at the life that had been stolen from her before she was old enough to remember it. This is impossible, she whispered. It's the truth, Petrov said. I spent 30 years trying to find you. The Mother Superior never responded to my letters. I thought perhaps she'd decided you were better off not knowing. Better off as an American citizen with a normal life. And maybe she was right. But fate, he gestured around the ballroom. Fate brought us together tonight, in this place, in front of these people, and now, he turned to face the crowd. Now, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, now you all know. The woman you mocked, the woman you called a charity case, the woman you said didn't belong here, she is the highest-ranking noble in this room. Possibly in this country, and you owe her an apology. You owe her your respect. And most of all, he looked directly at Victoria Harrington. You owe her your silence. Elena's legs gave out. Daniel caught her, lowering her into a chair that someone hastily provided. The baby was kicking wildly now, and Elena pressed both hands to her belly, trying to calm herself, trying to calm her daughter, trying to process what was happening. This isn't real, she said. This can't be real. It's real, Petrov said gently, kneeling beside her chair. I know, it's overwhelming. But Elena, your highness, it's real. Don't call me that, Elena said, her voice breaking. I don't know how to be. You don't have to know, Petrov said. You don't have to be anything other than who you already are. The title changes nothing about you as a person. You're still Elena, still a seamstress, still Daniel's wife, still this baby's mother. But now you also know where you came from. Now you know that you weren't abandoned. You were saved, protected, loved enough that someone risked everything to keep you alive. Elena looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Tell me about her. My mother, please. Petrov's expression softened. She was extraordinary, brilliant, kind, fierce. She spoke 6 languages. She played piano. She fought for her people, tried to modernize the country, to bring democracy and equality. That's why they rose up against her, not because she was a tyrant, but because powerful people feared losing their power. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Did she? Elena couldn't finish the question. She died protecting you, Petrov said quietly. The palace was burning. She could have escaped, but she stayed behind to create a diversion while I got you out. Her last words were, save my daughter, so I did. I brought you to America, to a place where no one would look for a Romanov heir, where you could grow up safe and free. And I've been searching for you ever since, hoping to tell you that your mother's last act was one of love. Elena sobbed, her whole body shaking. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she cried for a mother she'd never known, for a life that had been stolen. For all the years of thinking she was unwanted when the truth was she'd been wanted so desperately that someone had died for her. The crowd watched in stunned silence. And then, slowly people began to kneel. It started with Ambassador Petrov. Then his guards. Then others, men and women Elena didn't know, who'd been watching her humiliation with cruel amusement minutes ago, now lowering themselves in a gesture of respect. Or perhaps just self-preservation. Stop, Elena said, her voice hoarse. Please stop. I don't want this. But they didn't stop. One by one, nearly everyone in the ballroom knelt or bowed. Everyone except Victoria Harrington, who stood frozen, her face pale, her perfect composure finally cracking. This is absurd, Victoria said, but her voice was thin. She's nobody. She's a Grand Duchess, Petrov said coldly, rising to his feet. And you, Mrs. Harrington, have committed a grave diplomatic insult. If Moldavia were to lodge a formal complaint, the social and political consequences would be ... significant. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. However, Petrov continued, looking at Elena, that decision belongs to Her Highness. She may choose to accept your apology, or she may choose to remember tonight exactly as it happened. All eyes turned to Elena. She sat in the chair, 7 months pregnant, wearing her homemade dress, with tears still wet on her cheeks. She looked at Victoria Harrington, this woman who'd been so cruel, so dismissive, so certain of her own superiority. And Elena realized something. She realized that Victoria wasn't powerful. She was just wealthy. She wasn't strong. She was just mean. She wasn't better. She was just luckier. And luck, Elena now understood, could change in an instant. I don't want an apology, Elena said quietly. Victoria blinked, surprised. You ... no, Elena said. Because I don't think you'd mean it. I think you'd apologize because you're afraid, not because you're sorry. And I don't need that. She pushed herself to her feet, Daniel helping her. The baby had calmed now, as if sensing that the crisis had passed. What I want, Elena continued, her voice growing stronger, is for you to remember this moment. Remember how it felt to be so certain you were right about someone, only to discover you were wrong. Remember how easy it was for you to be cruel to someone you perceived as beneath you. And maybe let it change how you treat the next person you meet who doesn't meet your standards of wealth or status or belonging. She turned to address the entire ballroom. I didn't know I was a duchess until 5 minutes ago. And honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about it. It doesn't change anything about my life or who I am. But I did know, before tonight, that I was a human being who deserved basic kindness. And so is everyone else you'll ever meet. Titles don't make us valuable. Wealth doesn't make us worthy. We're valuable and worthy because we're human. That's it. That's the only qualification. The silence that followed was different now. Thoughtful. Ashamed. Elena turned to Victoria one last time. I want to thank you for tonight. Because you showed me exactly what kind of person I don't want to become. And you gave me a gift. You made me realize that I've spent my whole life thinking I wasn't enough because I didn't come from anything. But now I know I came from something extraordinary. Not the title, not the crown. But from a woman who loved me enough to die for me. That's the only inheritance that matters. Victoria said nothing. For the first time all evening, she had nothing to say. Elena took Daniel's hand. Can we go home now? Yes, Daniel said softly. Let's go home. They walked toward the exit, the crowd parting for them like water. But before they reached the door, Petrov called out. Your Highness, wait. Elena turned. Petrov approached with something in his hands, a small box, velvet, old. He opened it carefully. Inside, nestled on white silk, was the crown. The crown from the photograph. Delicate, beautiful, covered in diamonds and sapphires that caught the chandelier light and scattered it like stars. This, Petrov said, was recovered 6 months ago. A private collector in London had kept it hidden for years. When I learned of your existence, I purchased it. I was going to present it to you eventually, when I found you. But now, he held it out. Now seems like the right moment. Elena stared at the crown. The physical representation of a heritage she'd never known existed. A symbol of power and privilege and everything she'd been denied. She thought about taking it. About wearing it. About walking out of that ballroom with her head crowned and her dignity restored. But then she looked down at her belly, at the place where her daughter was growing. And she thought about what she wanted to teach this child about what mattered. Keep it, Elena said softly, or donate it to a museum. Or sell it and use the money to help orphans like I was. But I don't need it. I have everything I need right here. She squeezed Daniel's hand. Petrov's eyes filled with tears again. Your mother would be so proud of you. I hope so, Elena whispered. And then she walked out of the Grandview Country Club, leaving behind the crown, the gasping crowd, and the woman who'd tried to make her feel small. She left wearing her homemade dress, carrying her unborn child with her husband at her side. And she'd never felt more royal in her life. Katerina's 3rd birthday party was everything Elena had dreamed of giving her daughter, simple, joyful, and surrounded by people who loved her. The boutique's back room had been transformed with homemade decorations, paper streamers and rainbow colors, Balloons tied to chairs, a chocolate cake that Elena had stayed up late baking. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just a small gathering of the people who mattered. Katerina, wearing a dress Elena had sewn with tiny embroidered flowers, ran between guests with the boundless energy of a 3-year-old. Her dark curls, so much like Elena's, bounced as she laughed. Her gray eyes, Daniel's eyes, sparkled with pure joy. "Mama, Mama, look!" she called, holding up a stuffed rabbit that Elena's assistant had given her. "Beautiful, sweetheart," Elena said, crouching down to admire it properly. "What will you name her?" Katerina thought for a moment, her face serious. "Katya, like me," Elena's heart squeezed. Katerina didn't know yet that Katya was the Russian diminutive of Katerina, the name her grandmother might have been called as a child. But somehow, instinctively, her daughter had chosen it. "That's perfect," Elena whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Daniel appeared with plates of cake, and for a moment, Elena just watched her small, perfect world. Her shop was thriving. She had a waiting list of clients now. Daniel's job was stable. They'd moved to a bigger apartment last year, one with a bedroom for Katerina and even a tiny balcony where Elena grew herbs. It wasn't the life she'd been born to. It was better. Then the bell above the shop door chimed. Elena looked up, ready to tell whoever it was that they were closed for a private party, and froze. Victoria Harrington stood in the doorway. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a young woman mid-20s, blonde, impeccably dressed, who looked vaguely familiar. It took Elena a moment to place her. Bethany. The woman from the gala who'd called Elena a charity case playing dress-up. "What are you doing here?" Daniel's voice was ice. Victoria's gaze swept the room, the paper decorations, the modest cake, the handful of guests, and something flickered across her face. Not quite contempt, not quite pity. Something more complicated. "I need to speak with Elena," Victoria said. "It's urgent." "No," Daniel said flatly. "You need to leave. Now." "Daniel, please," said leave. He moved between his mother and Elena, physically blocking her. "You've done enough damage." "You're not welcome here." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "I know you have every right to hate me. I know I've been." She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I know I've failed you both, but this isn't about me. It's about Katerina." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She placed herself between Victoria and her daughter instinctively. "What about Katerina? Can we speak privately?" Victoria glanced at the guests, who were all watching with undisguised curiosity. "No," Elena said. "Whatever you have to say, you can say here." Victoria looked at Bethany, who stepped forward reluctantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Bethany said, and she actually sounded sincere. "But there's something you need to know. About the Harrington family trust." "I don't care about the trust," Daniel said. "I walked away from it years ago." "I know," Bethany said. "But the trust cares about you. Or more specifically, about your daughter." Elena's arms tightened around Katerina protectively. "What are you talking about?" Victoria took a breath. "The family trust has a clause. A very old clause that I'd forgotten about until our lawyers reminded me last month. Any direct descendant of the Harrington line is entitled to claim from the trust when they turn 18. It's automatic. Non-negotiable? So?" Daniel said. "That's 13 years away. Why are you here now?" "Because," Victoria said quietly, "the trust has been contested. By my brother-in-law, Richard. He's arguing that Katerina isn't eligible because—" She stopped, looking pained. "Because what?" Elena demanded. Bethany answered instead, her voice small. "Because he's claiming that the marriage between you and Daniel isn't legitimate. That it was fraudulent from the start." The room went deathly silent. "That's insane," Daniel said. "We're legally married. We have a marriage certificate. He's claiming that Daniel married you under false pretenses," Victoria interrupted. "That you trapped him. That the marriage should be annulled retroactively, which would make Katerina." "But I care about someone trying to destroy my daughter's legitimacy. I care about someone calling my marriage a fraud. And I care about the fact that you," she pointed at Victoria, are letting this happen. I'm not letting it happen, Victoria said, and for the first time Elena heard genuine emotion in her voice. I'm trying to stop it. But Richard has resources and he is vicious, and he has been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. "3 weeks, Bethany said. The hearing is in 3 weeks. And if they win, if they successfully argue that the marriage was fraudulent, then Katerina loses everything. Worse, she'd be publicly declared illegitimate. It'll follow her for the rest of her life." Elena looked down at her daughter, who was thankfully too young to understand what was being discussed. Katerina was playing with her new rabbit, humming to herself, completely innocent. "Why are you really here?" Elena asked Victoria. "You've stayed away for 3 years. Why show up now?" Victoria met her eyes. "Because I can't let Richard do this to my granddaughter. Because I realized too late. I know that I've been wrong about everything, about you, about what matters. And because," her voice broke, "because I saw the photos from the courtroom in The Hague. I saw you testifying, 8 months pregnant, fighting for your mother's memory. I saw the strength it took. And I was ashamed, Elena repeated flatly. "Ashamed that I tried to break someone like you," Victoria said. "Ashamed that I judged you for not having wealth when you had something far more valuable, integrity. Ashamed that I've been a terrible mother to Daniel and an even worse grandmother to Katerina." Tears were sliding down Victoria's face now, carving through her makeup. "I can't undo the past," she continued. "I can't take back the things I said at the gala or the years I've stayed away, but I can fight Richard. I can testify at the hearing. I can tell the truth that you and Daniel love each other, that your marriage is real, that Katerina is my legitimate grandchild and deserves everything the trust owes her." Elena stared at this woman who'd been so cruel to her, trying to determine if this was genuine or just another manipulation. "Why should I believe you?" Elena asked. "Because I'm asking you to," Victoria said simply. "I'm asking for a chance to do the right thing. Finally." Elena looked at Daniel. He was pale, his jaw tight, clearly torn between rage at his mother and hope that maybe, finally, something could be repaired. "It's your decision," he said to Elena. "Whatever you want to do. I'll support you." Elena looked back at Katerina, still playing innocently. Then at Victoria, standing in her expensive clothes in Elena's modest shop, tears on her face, pride finally broken. "Tell me everything," Elena said. "Every detail about this hearing. Every argument Richard is going to make. Everything." Victoria nodded, relief flooding her features. "Thank you." "Thank you, Elena. I promise I won't—" "Don't promise anything," Elena interrupted. "Just tell me what we're up against." They met at Victoria's penthouse the next evening, neutral ground that wasn't the boutique but wasn't the country club either. Elena had never been to Victoria's home before. It was exactly what she'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that cost more than cars, art on the walls that belonged in museums. Katerina stayed with Elena's assistant for the evening. This conversation wasn't for 3-year-old ears. Richard Harrington arrived with a team of lawyers. He was older than Victoria, with silver hair and the kind of face that smiled but never with his eyes. When he saw Elena, his expression turned cold. "So this is the famous Duchess," he said mockingly. "The woman who trapped my nephew and thinks she's entitled to family money." "I've never asked for a cent from your family," Elena said evenly. "But my daughter is entitled to what's legally hers." "Your daughter," Richard repeated. "Assuming she is legally your daughter. Assuming the marriage that produced her was legitimate. Assuming any of this fairy tale you've spun is true." "It is true," Daniel said, his voice hard. "Is it?" Richard pulled out a folder. "Because I've done some research. Elena Westbrook, or should I say Elena Katerina Alexeyevna Romanova, came to this country at age 16 with nothing. No family, no money, no prospects. She worked as a seamstress, barely scraping by until she met my nephew. They married after knowing each other for 6 months. She was pregnant 3 months later. And now we're supposed to believe this was true love?" "It was," Elena said. "It is." Richard smiled. "Then you won't mind answering some questions under oath, about how you met, about your intentions." About whether you knew who Daniel was when you targeted him. I didn't target anyone. No? A poor immigrant with royal blood she didn't know about just happened to walk into the shop where Harrington brought his jacket. That's quite a coincidence. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. The way Richard phrased it made everything sound calculated, predatory. It was a coincidence, Daniel said. I chose that shop randomly. Did you? Richard turned to him. Or did someone recommend it to you? Perhaps someone who knew Elena worked there? No one recommended it. I found it online. Convenient. And you fell in love immediately? With a woman who, by your own admission, you knew nothing about? That's how love works sometimes, Daniel said. But Elena heard the doubt creeping into his voice. Richard heard it too. He smiled. The hearing is in 3 weeks. I suggest you prepare better answers than that. Because I'm going to prove that this marriage was a fraud from day one. That Elena manipulated my nephew for his money and his name, and that their daughter. He looked at Elena with cold triumph. She's the product of entrapment, not love. After Richard left, Elena sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. He's going to destroy us, she said quietly. No, Victoria said firmly. He's going to try. But we're not going to let him. Elena looked at her mother-in-law. Why are you helping us, really? Is it just about the money? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. When you testified at The Hague, I watched the video. You stood in front of those men who killed your mother, and you said, I'm living proof that you're liars. You were 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and you could have stayed home, stayed safe. But you didn't, because you knew it mattered. She paused. I haven't done anything that matters in years. Maybe decades. I've thrown parties and sat on charity boards and judged people based on their bank accounts. And I thought that made me important. But watching you fight for something real, I realized I'd been worthless. Victoria, Daniel started. Let me finish, Victoria said. Elena, I was cruel to you because I was afraid. Afraid that you'd change Daniel. Afraid that you'd take him away from the life I'd planned for him. Afraid that you'd make him happy in a way I never could, and I was right. You did all those things, but they weren't bad things. They were good things. You saved my son. She looked at Daniel with tears in her eyes. You were drowning before you met Elena, working a job you hated. Dating women I approved of but you didn't love. Living a life that was killing you slowly, and I didn't see it. Or I didn't want to see it, but Elena saw it. She loved you back to life. And I repaid her by trying to destroy her. Victoria turned back to Elena. So yes, I'm fighting Richard because I don't want Katerina to lose her inheritance. But I'm also fighting him because I need to prove to you, to Daniel, to myself, that I can do one good thing before I die. That I can stand up for what's right instead of what's convenient. Elena studied Victoria's face, looking for deception and finding only exhaustion and genuine regret. Okay, Elena said finally. We'll fight together. But Victoria, if you turn on us again, if you betray us again, I will never forgive you, and you'll never see your granddaughter again. Do you understand? I understand, Victoria said. And I won't, I promise. The courtroom was smaller than the one in The Hague, but somehow more intimidating. This wasn't about international war crimes or historical justice. This was about Elena's marriage, her daughter. Her worthiness to be part of a family that had never wanted her. Richard's lawyers went first. They called witnesses, people who'd been at the gala, who testified to Elena's obvious social climbing. They presented financial records showing how much money Elena had gained access to after marrying Daniel. They showed timelines proving how quickly the relationship had progressed. 6 months from meeting to marriage, Richard's lead lawyer said. 3 months from marriage to pregnancy. This wasn't love. This was a business transaction. And Miss Westbrook, Miss Romanova, or whatever she's calling herself this week, is a con artist who saw an opportunity and took it. Objection, Elena's lawyer said. Counsel is testifying instead of questioning. Sustained, the judge said. Stay within bounds, counselor. But the damage was done. The courtroom murmured. Reporters scribbled notes. Richard smiled. Then it was their turn. Elena's lawyer called Daniel first. Mr. Harrington, did your wife know about your family's wealth when you met? No, Daniel said firmly. I never mentioned it. I wanted someone to love me for who I was, not what I had. And did she ever ask about money? Never. In fact, she insisted on paying for half our dates, even though I could tell she was struggling financially. She never wanted to feel like she owed me anything. Did she pressure you into marriage? No, I proposed. She was actually hesitant because she didn't want me to rush into anything. And the pregnancy? Was unplanned. But wanted. We were married. We loved each other. We welcomed our daughter, Richard's lawyer cross-examined. Mr. Harrington, isn't it true that you were estranged from your family at the time you met Ms. Westbrook? Yes. And isn't it true that you were living modestly in a small apartment, working a job that didn't pay particularly well? Yes. So how would Ms. Westbrook have known you had family wealth? She wouldn't have, Daniel said. That's my point. Or, the lawyer suggested, perhaps someone told her. Perhaps she'd done research. Perhaps she knew exactly who you were and targeted you deliberately. That's not what happened. Can you prove that? Daniel hesitated. I know my wife. I know her heart. That's not proof, Mr. Harrington. That's faith. And faith doesn't hold up in court. Then they called Elena. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, wearing a dress she'd made specifically for this hearing, simple, elegant, dignified. She refused to let them make her feel small. Ms. Westbrook, Harrington, Elena corrected. My legal name is Elena Harrington. The lawyer smiled thinly. Of course, Miss Harrington, when you met Daniel Harrington, did you know who he was? I knew his name was Daniel. I knew he worked in finance. I knew he was kind. Did you know about the Harrington family? Not at first. But eventually you learned? Yes. Daniel told me about his family when we started getting serious. He explained that he was estranged from them. And how did you feel about that? Sad for him. Family is important. Important enough to scheme to get access to? I never schemed. I fell in love. How convenient. A poor orphan falls in love with a wealthy man, gets pregnant, locks in the relationship, and now claims her daughter deserves millions of dollars. Elena's hands clenched. My daughter deserves what the trust promises to all Harrington descendants. That has nothing to do with my relationship with Daniel, doesn't it? If your marriage is fraudulent, she's not a legitimate descendant. My marriage isn't fraudulent. I love my husband. He loves me. We built a life together based on mutual respect and partnership. Money never entered into it. Then why fight so hard for the trust money? Elena leaned forward. Because I'm not going to let you declare my daughter illegitimate because you're greedy. This isn't about the money. This is about you trying to steal from a child because you don't think she does enough for your precious family name. I'm trying to protect the family from gold diggers. I'm not a gold digger, Elena said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. I'm a woman who survived an orphanage, built a business with my own hands, raised a daughter with love, and yes, married a man from a wealthy family. But I didn't marry him for his wealth. I married him because he saw me as a person, not a charity case or a con artist, because he loved me when I thought I was nobody. And I would have married him if he'd been poor for the rest of his life. The courtroom was silent. No further questions, Richard's lawyer said, but Elena wasn't finished. I have something to say, the judge looked surprised. Miss Harrington. Please, Elena said. I need to say this. The judge nodded. Go ahead. Elena stood, addressing not the lawyers but Richard himself. You don't know me, she said. You've never tried to know me. You've decided I'm worthless because I grew up poor and foreign. But let me tell you what I learned growing up in that orphanage. I learned that family isn't about blood or money or status. It's about who shows up for you. Who loves you when you're difficult. Who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. She paused. Daniel showed up for me when no one else ever had. He loved me when I was difficult, and pregnant women are very difficult. He fought for me against his own mother because he believed I was worth it. That's why I married him. Not because of some trust fund. Because he's the only family I'd ever known. She looked at the judge. And Katerina is the first blood family I've ever had. She's the first person in my entire life who shares my DNA, who came from me, who will carry on when I'm gone. So yes, I'm fighting for her inheritance. Not because she needs the money, but because she deserves to be recognized as legitimate. She deserves to grow up knowing that she belongs. And I will not let anyone, not Richard, not his lawyers, not this court tell my daughter that she's less than anyone else because her mother didn't have the right pedigree. Elena's voice broke. I spent my whole life being told I wasn't enough, that I didn't belong, that I should be grateful for scraps. And then I found out I was a duchess, and you know what? It didn't change anything. I'm still me. Still the same person who lived in that orphanage, who sewed clothes for a living, who married for love. The title didn't make me valuable. I was always valuable. We're all valuable. And my daughter is going to grow up knowing that, whether this court recognizes it or not. She sat down, her hands shaking. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. Order. We'll take a recess and reconvene in 1 hour for closing arguments. The verdict during the recess, Elena stood outside the courtroom trying to catch her breath. Daniel wrapped his arms around her. You were incredible, he whispered. I was terrified. You were both. Victoria approached hesitantly. Elena, if you're going to apologize again, don't, Elena said. Just testify well, Victoria nodded. I will. When they reconvened, Victoria took the stand. Mrs. Harrington, Elena's lawyer said. You were present at the gala where your daughter-in-law's identity was revealed. Can you describe what happened that night? Victoria took a breath. I was cruel, deliberately, systematically cruel. I mocked Elena's dress, her background, her pregnancy. I called her a charity case. I encouraged others to humiliate her. And I did it because I'm a snob who values money over character. The courtroom stirred. Why are you testifying against your own brother-in-law? Richard's lawyer asked on cross-examination. Because he's wrong, Victoria said simply. Elena didn't trap my son. She saved him. And Katerina is my legitimate granddaughter, whether Richard likes it or not. You're only saying that because you were shamed publicly when Elena's identity was revealed. No, Victoria said. I'm saying it because it's true. I was shamed publicly because I deserved to be shamed. I judged Elena without knowing her. I dismissed her without giving her a chance. And I've spent 3 years regretting it. She looked directly at Richard. You're doing the same thing I did. You're deciding Elena isn't good enough based on where she came from, instead of who she is. You're trying to punish a child for having the wrong mother, and I won't let you. Not anymore. After closing arguments, the judge deliberated for 3 hours. When he returned, the courtroom was packed. This has been a complicated case, the judge began. The question before this court is whether the marriage between Daniel Harrington and Elena Westbrook was entered into fraudulently, with the intent to access family money. Elena held her breath. The evidence presented shows a rushed courtship and quick pregnancy. However, evidence also shows that Miss Westbrook, now Mrs. Harrington, never actually accessed significant amounts of family money. She continued working. She lived modestly. She built her own business with her own funds. She has never filed suit against the family trust or made demands for money. The judge paused. Furthermore, the revelation of her royal heritage, which came after the marriage, complicates the narrative that she was simply a gold digger. If Mrs. Harrington were truly motivated by money and status, she had far greater opportunities available to her as the last Romanov heir. She chose not to pursue them. Elena's heart hammered. Most importantly, this court must consider the welfare of the child in question. Katerina Harrington is 3 years old. She is blameless in whatever circumstances led to her parents' marriage. And this court will not declare a child illegitimate simply because adults are fighting over money. The judge looked at Richard. The marriage between Daniel and Elena Harrington is ruled legitimate. Katerina Harrington is ruled a legitimate heir to the Harrington family trust. All provisions of the trust apply to her in full. Case dismissed. The gavel came down. Elena burst into tears. Daniel grabbed her, holding her as she sobbed with relief. Victoria approached them slowly. Thank you, she said to Elena. Thank you for letting me do the right thing. Elena looked at her mother-in-law, this complicated, flawed woman who'd caused so much pain but had finally chosen to fight on the right side. You're welcome, Elena said. And Victoria? You can meet your granddaughter now. Really meet her. Victoria's face crumpled. I'd like that very much. 6 months later, Elena stood in her boutique, putting the finishing touches on a wedding dress. The bride had come to her specifically because she read about Elena's story, the duchess who chose love over a throne. I want something that shows who I really am, the bride had said. Not who people expect me to be. Elena understood that perfectly. The bell chimed. Katerina ran in, followed by Daniel and Victoria. Mama! Katerina launched herself at Elena. Grandma Victoria took me to the park and we fed ducks. Elena looked at Victoria, who was smiling, genuinely smiling, and holding a bag from Katerina's favorite bakery. We got you a coffee, Victoria said. The way you like it. It was a small gesture. But it meant everything. Over the past months, Victoria had been slowly, carefully building a relationship with her granddaughter. she showed up. She listened. She asked about Katerina's interests instead of trying to mold her into some ideal. She was learning, finally, what it meant to love without conditions. Thank you, Elena said, taking the coffee. Victoria looked around the boutique at the dresses Elena had made, at the satisfied customers, at the life her daughter-in-law had built. I'm proud of you, Victoria said quietly. I should have said that years ago. You're saying it now, Elena replied. That's what matters. That evening, after the shop was closed, Elena found the velvet box tucked in the back of her closet. She opened it, looking at the crown that represented everything she'd walked away from. Katerina appeared in the doorway. What's that, Mama? Something that belonged to your great-grandmother, Elena said. It's pretty. Is it yours? Technically, yes. Can I try it on? Elena hesitated, then carefully lifted the crown and placed it on Katerina's small head. It was far too big, of course, sliding down over her daughter's eyes. Katerina giggled. I'm a princess. You are, Elena said, but not because of the crown. You're a princess because you're kind and brave and you love people with your whole heart. The crown is just jewelry. Then why do we keep it? Elena thought about that. To remember. To remember that your great-grandmother loved you enough to die for you, even though she never met you. To remember where you came from. But not to let it define where you're going. Katerina took the crown off and handed it back. I like my dress better anyway. Elena laughed, putting the crown away. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Later, when Katerina was asleep and Daniel was reading beside her in bed, Elena said, Do you ever regret it? Regret what? Marrying me. Everything that came after. Daniel set down his book and looked at her. Elena, you're the best decision I ever made. You, Katerina, this life, it's everything I didn't know I needed, even though I brought chaos. Especially because of that. You showed me that the life I was living before wasn't really living. It was just existing, going through motions. Playing a role. He took her hand. You taught me that real wealth isn't in a trust fund. It's in moments like this. It's in our daughter's laugh. It's in the way you create beauty from fabric and thread. It's in knowing that the person sleeping beside you chose you, not your bank account or your name, but you. Elena kissed him. I love you. I love you too, my duchess, my seamstress. My wife. Just Elena, she corrected with a smile. No, Daniel said. Not just anything. You're Elena, and that's everything. On Katerina's 18th birthday, she stood in front of the Harrington trust lawyers with her parents on either side of her. Miss Harrington, the lawyer said, your trust has matured. You now have access to $30 million. We've prepared several investment portfolios for your consideration. I'd like to donate it. Katerina interrupted. The lawyer blinked. I'm sorry? The money, I'd like to donate most of it to orphanages, to programs that help children in foster care, to scholarships for kids like my mom who had to fight for every opportunity. She glanced at Elena, who was crying. I don't need $30 million, Katerina continued. My parents taught me that real security comes from skills and character, not bank accounts. But there are kids out there right now who are growing up the way my mom did, thinking they nobody, thinking they don't matter. And if this money can help even one of them realize they're worthy of love and opportunity, then it's worth more than any trust fund. The lawyer looked at Elena and Daniel. Is this ... Are you comfortable with this decision? It's her money, Elena said. Her choice. We're incredibly proud, Daniel added. Katerina signed the papers directing the majority of the trust to various charities. She kept enough for college tuition and a small emergency fund. Everything else went to children who needed it more. As they left the office, Katerina linked arms with her mother. You know, she said, at school, some kids call me the princess. Because of the whole duchess thing. Does that bother you? Elena asked. Not really. I usually tell them I'm not a princess. I'm a seamstress's daughter. And that's way cooler. Elena laughed, her heart full to bursting. They walked home together, Elena, Daniel, and Katerina, through the Brooklyn streets Elena had walked for years. Past the bakery where she'd lived above as a young immigrant. Past the original alterations shop where she'd first met Daniel. Past the boutique that now bore both her name and Katerina's. Katerina's. Custom garments by Elena and Kat. The sign had been updated last year when Katerina started designing her own pieces, showing the same gift with fabric that her mother had. Do you ever regret it? Katerina asked as they walked. Giving up the throne? The crown? All of that? Elena thought about the orphanage. The gala. The courtroom battles. The choice to build instead of claim, to create instead of inherit, to love instead of rule. Never, she said, not once. Why not? Because the only crown worth wearing, Elena said, is the one made of moments like this. The invisible crown of being exactly who you're meant to be, surrounded by people who love you for it. That's royalty. That's legacy. That's everything, Katerina smiled. I like that. I do too. And as they walked home together, 3 generations of strong women connected. By love and choice rather than obligation or blood, Elena felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Not the peace of having everything. The peace of being enough. She'd been called a charity case playing dress-up. She'd been revealed as a duchess. She'd been offered a crown. And she'd chosen love instead. It was the best choice she'd ever made. The only crown she'd ever needed. The crown that had been hers all along, the one she'd sewn herself, stitch by stitch, from courage and kindness and the unshakable belief that she was worthy. That crown? That crown silenced them all.